Welcome back to the Snod Pod with Jon Snodgrass, your mortgage resource, where we're talking mortgages, real estate, and beyond. Today is a Beyond episode. I've got Brian Callahan in here from Quovis, an executive search and recruiting company.
Correct.
Brian, thanks for coming in, man.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
This is exciting. I've never done a podcast before, so this is a little surreal, but it's exciting. So thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple episodes with some entrepreneurs, and we've worked together on some real estate stuff, and so I've gotten to know your business a little bit that way. And I just thought you've become so successful. I'd love to kind of hear your journey. So let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
So both UW-Eau Claire guys.
Go Blue Golds.
Yes. Did you know right away that you wanted to get into recruiting?
Interesting. Yeah. As an English major at UW-Eau Claire, I could do one of two things. It was going to be, go into education or perhaps law.
Yeah.
But I love business. I always liked the idea of working in an organization from a business perspective. Okay. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Just serendipitously met somebody as I was coming upon graduation time, needed to get the job, start thinking about income.
Yeah.
Met somebody in the recruiting industry out of Chicago that encouraged me to pursue that as a potential career opportunity. And I worked with a really large company out of college that was in the technical staffing space, so temporary hiring. Okay. Did that for a couple of years, really enjoyed the hiring. At a very young age, along with a couple of other people that I had met there along the way, decided, we should do this on our own. This would be a lot of fun. But a lot of lessons learned there. We could talk about at a later point during the conversation today. But I stayed with recruiting, ultimately working with a larger organization, a big Fortune 100, GE Healthcare. Fantastic experience. And it offered me the opportunity to do the recruiting and hiring for a large organization, lots of different areas within the organization, from technical recruiting to marketing and sales. Ultimately got into human resources management within the organization, which was, again, fantastic experience, met some terrific people. I started to have my own personal challenges where we'd get to the point of reductions in force and having to slide folders across the table. And I realized that for me, it was about telling other people's stories and hiring and finding the right talent to an organization versus the other side and, shaking people's hands on the way out the door. So, again, happy to be in business, loved the recruiting angles, and decided that I was going to continue to do that, but just solely focused on recruiting and hiring.
Okay. So that makes sense. I'm thinking about that movie Up in the Air with George Clooney, where he's, sliding. Oh, man. But I mean, good experience. You learned what you didn't want to do.
Yeah. And more than that, I think working in large organizations like GE, I met some just terrific people that had unbelievable careers, even from there within GE and outside of the organization. But I think one of the lessons for me in watching other people that had been there for 20 years, 30 years, and then were asked to leave the organization, it's all the eggs in one basket. So for me, I always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial bent within me and that excitement to go out and build something new. I think from even the early stages, we all pushed lawnmowers back in fifth grade and delivered papers in seventh grade. I loved that opportunity. Yeah. And I thought from here on out, it was going to be a little bit more in small to mid-sized organizations or eventually on my own.
Okay. So you mentioned you kind of cut your teeth after your first job, or I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. Sure. So you started a business after that? So before you went to the corporate job?
So before GE, myself and a few people that I had met in my first
How old are you at this point?
Probably, this would be 25 years old, 24, 25 years old.
So a couple years experience.
A couple years out of college. Ended up starting up a small recruiting business focused on IT. And again, it was staffing, so temporary placements of IT professionals. Okay. We did well early on, but one of the tough lessons I had was when you're really young and you start making money and you're not paying somebody else, you feel flush, feel like things are really good, and you can't possibly imagine that things might get thin again. Yeah. So that was a big lesson for me early on, was anytime you're talking about building a business, how you manage that money is going to be really important. And again, we could talk a little bit more some of the details behind that in our latest venture that we started almost 20 years ago. Yeah. But boy, it was tough. And that's ultimately the ups and the downs. We didn't really account for that.
Okay.
So that's how I wound up at GE.
So again, learning, I mean,
big learning experience,
huge learning experience. I mean, like I listened to like, Gary Vee and other, I'm sure other, we exchange podcasts from time to time. And like entrepreneurs, I feel like so many of them have failed, and you learn
as you
from
go.
That failure.
Absolutely.
So after the corporate gig, you realize that's not for you. Do you go work for a smaller company, or when do you start Quovis?
So there was another company that was a startup in the Milwaukee area that I ended up joining after GE, along with several other people.
Okay.
It was an opportunity, as they would say, build this business as though it were your own, which we worked hard to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes hard to run something as your own when it's not really your own.
Yeah.
But it was an opportunity to get back into the recruiting space. Again, just reiterating how much I enjoyed that angle. I was there for 2 years or so before I ventured out on my own with a business partner to start our current company, Quovis.
Okay. And how did you meet the business partner? Were you guys...
Well, he's actually another UW Eau Claire graduate as well, and we worked together right out of college. We actually didn't know each other. He was a couple years ahead of me at UW Eau Claire. Just again, good people meet good people.
Yeah.
So that was our good first experiences together. And then when we left that first company, he was one of the other partners in what was called River Lake Associates before we wound up, going back to corporate or taking our stint in corporate.
Okay.
But that's my business partner today as well. But we've known each other for years and years and years. We're in each other's weddings.
Okay.
So good friends, but good business partners as well.
So let's dive into to Quovis, your company that you've started 20 years ago. Sure. I guess first, before tell us a little bit about Quovis. What are you guys doing? What's your niche?
Sure. So Quovis is a business that's a professional and executive search firm, and I say both of those things because I think sometimes when we say we're an executive search firm, people think, oh, so you're only placing vice presidents and C-level leadership, and that's not really true. It's professional level and above, and we can do that in numerous different ways. We started this business up where Dan and myself, my business partner, and I are doing a lot of the executive leadership placement, but we do work with other recruiters that become part of our organization on an as-needed basis, working with other organizations to either build up recruiting programs internally for them, that would be recruitment process outsourcing, or we'll do high-volume recruiting projects, again, leveraging other recruiters, and sometimes we're doing that work ourselves, depending upon the client. But in terms of the niche and where we're focused, it's primarily mid-market industrial manufacturing companies, often privately held or family-run companies. And then outside of the industrial manufacturing, we also do a little bit of work within the food industry and technology, so software companies in the local area. And we're placing people not just here locally, but across the United States and even in Europe.
Yeah, so it's Japan too?
Germany, Spain, France, Poland, Czech Republic, even in Japan as well. So it's been, and ironically, the name Quovis means to whatever place you'll go, which how could we have predicted, 19 plus years ago that we really would have gotten to that point that we are placing people all over the world based upon client needs. And usually the headquarters of the companies we're working with are Wisconsin, Illinois, or at least northern, Midwest.
Got it. I want to circle back to some more stuff about the business, but I want to go back to the beginning of Quovis. You got a business partner, and you guys worked together at the startup.
We did.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got a taste of it, and so tell me a little bit about the beginning. I mean, you guys you've been through a failure, if that's okay to say.
It's a learning experience.
Sorry.
It's a failure. It's only a failure. I think it's a failure if you learn nothing about it, right? We learned a lot and continued to build again.
Yes, thank you. I need you. I need you on my side with my kids. I probably say things like that.
Oh, we should talk a lot about that.
Well, that'll be next episode.
Talk about failure. No, I'm kidding.
All right. So, ground rules you're setting with Dan, your business partner, because I think about because I had a business too that didn't work, but I feel like a lot of times, starting a business with somebody, it's kind of like a marriage, but without the sex affection, if you will. I mean,
that's true in this business.
I hope
there
so.
may be others that aren't the same,
but it's like a marriage, I guess. There's
absolutely.
a point. Like, what kind of, what were you guys talking about? Hey, we got to learn from our failure.
I mean, the biggest things that we took away from that first business were to understand that as you're growing a business, you need to be putting money away in the business, reinvesting back into the business, just as you do at home. So you know, when you're working for another organization, you have a paycheck. Hopefully, you're putting money away into a 401k and other investable assets, whether it's real estate or whatnot. So we're doing the same within the organization. So before the money ever comes home, it was very important to us to have a plan for the ups and the downs. That when money's coming in, you don't bring that money home. So
which is what you were doing in the
Absolutely.
earlier one. But you're 25, 26, 27. I get it.
25-year-old? No, just kidding. I think the 25-year-old kids are probably smarter today than they were when I was 25. But
Look at all
we
this,
live and
you
we
know.
learn.
Yeah,
we live and we
right.
learn. What are some of the lessons you learned? I mean, again, Pedal Tavern, I know, is something that you were involved in, and there's learnings there.
So my friend Derek Collins,
Yes.
you know Derek, and started the Pedal Tavern. Now he's kind of like Mr. Entrepreneur travel business guy in Milwaukee. He's got so many, Paddle Tavern, Duffy boats, whatnot.
A lot of fun.
So right when he started out, along with my other friend Ryan, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I was like, man, these guys are just crushing it. It's so easy.
Right.
Not knowing that there's a lot that goes into it.
Right.
And I'm like, man, it would kill it out of here in an LA beach community. So I called them up, and Derek was on board, and so we started first we went down to San Diego thinking like, oh, big city.
Sure.
And I'd known, some flat areas. So we walk in to City Hall, you're just trying to, fake it till you make it almost. We asked for a meeting with the mayor.
Yeah. No big deal.
Yeah.
He's not busy.
We're like,
He's
let's
not
just
busy.
go. Well, what we did was like we ordered the bike first, which was like $40,000.
Ask forgiveness later.
That's kind of what we did. We're like, let's just order it and we'll get it done. And then couldn't get a meeting with the mayor, although we did see the mayor later on that day. We're like, hey, Mr. Mayor, and he had bodyguards and they kind of blew us off. But the city attorney was actually from Wisconsin, from like Racine or Kenosha. So we're like, let's go see if we can use our Wisconsin. Sure. So we actually, he met with us and just was like, guys, this ain't Wisconsin. This is California. We're not business friendly. And like, he's like, my guess is it's going to take you a year to even get on the street. Yeah. So then we're like, okay. And we went to a beach community in LA and they were actually super cool. They're like, oh yeah, we'll just call you a pedicab. Yeah. Like those.
Yep, sure.
So I ended up running it there, and I was still doing mortgages, and then 9 to 5, or way more than 9 to 5, and then I would work. I was the driver at night, Wednesday through Sunday.
Right.
And then started to get a little success, and was able to hire another driver, and then Derek would fly out on occasion. It ended up not working out for a few reasons. But it was not as easy as I thought.
Right.
And there were, one of the big issues was LA is so crowded and nobody in the beach community liked it.
Yeah.
They hated it.
Yeah. And they're there.
They're there in their $1 million houses.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And we got like these awesome speakers. We're just having fun. And so anyways, we had some troubles and ended up closing up shop. But, the biggest thing I learned was I wasn't all in. I was just like, oh, I'll do a side business and hopefully just make a bunch of money on the side. And not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. But it's tough to strike the right balance on that, too. You hear a lot of people say, you have a job, you work another job at night to build something, and it can work. But boy, I mean, you need more than 24 hours a day oftentimes to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
And you add in marriage and kids and
right.
other responsibilities.
I was getting married at the time. And
it's really hard. I mean, it's a full-time job starting up a company.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, the biggest thing I learned was got to be all in.
Yep.
And then the money.
Sure.
So I guess take me into, there's this kind of transitions. We didn't take on any, we kind of had one investor, but he kind of helped out, which was nice because I didn't have anybody to report to. When we had our kind of pre-production meeting, you had talked about that being a benefit for you guys, not taking on investors. Tell me a little bit about that.
For us, it was a huge benefit. And it was another thing that Dan and I agreed to very early on is we need to start this business and we need to fund this business as opposed to having outside investors. And there's a lot of companies that have obviously been very successful in bringing on outside investors. But our concern, and I've seen this, where outside investors come to the table to help build up a business, and at some point along the way, whether it's early on, later on, you start thinking a lot more about the investors and the return on the investment, as opposed to thinking about your customers, as opposed to thinking about your employees, as opposed to thinking about what's right for the longevity of the business. And in doing that, it allows us and has allowed us to make sometimes difficult decisions about taking on certain projects or taking on certain clients that maybe to an outside investor would say there's too much risk involved in this, or this isn't going to provide the return that we need to continue to invest into the organization. So for us, it's been very beneficial. And then we get into talking about how we've reinvested into the business, not just from a tools standpoint to grow the business or bringing on people to the organizations as needed. It's taking the capital and making it work for us. Non-traditional things, like at one point we worked with you along the way in acquiring a rental property.
Yeah.
So there's things we've done together as business that would be pretty hard to go to an investor and say, this isn't core to our business. How would you feel about us
why are you buying this piece of real
and
estate?
investing in real estate?
Which is like turned out to be, because that was like in 2010, 2012, I don't know,
sure.
a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Yeah, I think you still have it, right?
Yeah. So it's investing in different assets like that makes it a lot easier for you to do it when you've got just one business partner, or you're working on your own and you don't have to go to an investor to get approval for it, other than to your spouses.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
They're all in with us.
Sure.
We get the green light from them.
Right. Going back to, kind of your core clients that you're trying to place executives. So like I'm thinking like a C-suite level
and professionals. This could be management and above.
Okay.
So again, we call ourselves a professional and executive recruiting firm, because we're not just placing vice presidents and C-level. Okay. But oftentimes that's the case.
Okay. And what's the process when you talk to somebody? Because I imagine it's not like, hey, you meet somebody and like, oh yeah, we'll get you a job in 2 weeks. Like, what is the process, and what is, for the company that's going to hire the guy or gal, how long does that take?
Every situation is going to be different. It depends upon the position. It depends upon the client. It depends on whether or not this position is, perhaps it's a confidential search. There may be somebody that's retiring in the organization, and we're helping behind the scenes to identify a successor. So there's a lot of different circumstances that kind of play into the timeline for identifying and hiring somebody for the organization. But we customize that approach for each of our clients. And I think that's, again, really, really important when you're a small business. In fact, it does make me think about early days. We still have a client today who has been now with 3 different companies over 17 years, but he initially reached out to us directly, came from a very large, privately held company, we'll just say in the retail space. Reached out. He had been working with a lot of these very large executive search firms, global, publicly traded search firms, and felt at this point they needed somebody that was more of a boutique firm that was going to figure out how to work with them. What makes sense for that client, as opposed to blanket statement of this is how search is done and this is how we're going to provide it for you. Yeah. So we took a different approach with him and with this particular customer, and really being an extension of them, working as though we were the recruiter down the hall in their corporate headquarters, even though we weren't. Sure. We would take trips there as needed, understand the culture of the business, and that really, I think, 17 years later shows 3 customers later, he's still heading up talent that we're working with them, and in his company he's been with I think he's been there 4 or 5 years at this point. But taking a different approach.
So getting to learn the culture, that's interesting. So are you actually like spending like the day there and working from there for the day or half day?
It's critical to spend time to get to know the customers from a culture standpoint.
So you are doing
yes. So we'll be on site as needed early on with a customer interaction. I
didn't know that.
Understand the business. So again, I think that's the reason why most of our customers have been with a headquarters in Wisconsin or Northern Illinois. Again, not restricted to that. Sure. But I think that's where you get to understand the business culture. And when there's other locations that we support them in hiring leaders for, we're still basing a lot of that culture around that U.S.-centric if it's global, or Midwest-centric if it's placing people in other parts of the country. Okay.
Along the same lines, I think when you worked in the corporate world, and that was a long time ago now. It was. But either from there or others, I mean, do you ever have a big corporate company or maybe mid-sized company reach out to you and say, hey, Brian, Dan, we're not finding the candidate on our own? Do they reach out to you and say, hey, can you help us?
Oftentimes that's the case. And in fact, I'd recommend that when a company has the ability to hire somebody on their own, whether it's through their own internal recruiting teams or employee referrals, it makes sense. So yes, you were usually brought in when there's a point where they've exhausted their own abilities to identify somebody, or as I mentioned earlier, John, if there's a confidential search, those situations oftentimes they kind of keep it quiet even within the organization. Okay. But that's usually the case.
Okay. And then just curious, like, I don't know if you can share it. Tell me if I'm...
What's in the secret sauce?
Well, sure. Yeah. What's in the secret sauce? No, was the question is, I guess, like, what's how long are the people staying? I mean, or the success rate? Yeah.
It's a good question. Again, after 20 years, we've probably got a lot of different experiences along the way on both ends of the spectrum, but we do track that. And within the organization over the last 19 years, we've had a high success rate, and I don't have the metrics right in front of me right now. High success. But I'll jump right in with just answering the question. We do track the success rate of our placements and have guarantees in place if people leave before a certain period of time that we'll replace those individuals. But we have metrics in place that show a very, very high success of people doing well in the role and being promoted into a second position. So that's one of the things that we look at in terms of real success. So have you exceeded expectations? Have you been able to grow and thrive within the company and hopefully have opportunities to be promoted to add continued value to that company?
And then I'm thinking, like, my own career, worked at a place where they hired a sales manager kind of on their own, and the guy was like, oh, I'm Mr. Cool, and I'm, like, just had some bravado, and, like, the rest of, like, pretty much all of us were like, don't hire this guy, and he got hired.
Sure.
And, like, within 6 months, finally, the owner realized this was not a right fit. It's like somebody who talks a big game but doesn't deliver.
And you're asking me,
do you ever have somebody like that where, like, a company's like, Brian, Dan, and maybe that's not a good question.
No, it's a good question. I think ever's a really big word. Certainly, in the 25, almost 30 years of experience I've had in recruiting people, situations have come up where you're going, this just was not a good fit for the organization. Sometimes it's through our recruiting firm that maybe had a hand in that, maybe not, but we've seen it all. And from our perspective, when this happens, again, we stand by our services to make sure that we're replacing this with somebody that's going to work long term. But absolutely, these things happen within organizations. It happens less and less, I think, the more you get to know your customer and the more time you spend understanding the culture. I would actually say that it's happened more often where we get called because somebody else was placed by, whether it's internal resources, they wanted to save money, they had somebody that applied to the job, they had somebody's cousin that they think this person's going to be fantastic, and they realize one of the advantages of working with any outside firm is that you're not just getting somebody that is in the market or on the market right now, but you're looking for the best person that could possibly do this job for you, and canvassing proactively as opposed to simply looking at who's applied to the role.
Like this was almost like a cool golfing buddy. It's like, no, what? You should have probably called Brian, and Brian could have got you in touch with somebody. You're not like
happy to spend time on the golf course too to learn a little more about what it is you're looking for. That's not all bad.
I just thought I'd bring that up. It just it brought to mind.
Absolutely, and nothing. A lot of the companies we work with are, again, small to mid-sized organizations. By design. Again, it's just the ability to really develop relationships with the decision makers at the top. As opposed to public companies where there's so much change happening in the organization, you could develop a relationship with somebody that's moved on to another organization or been promoted. I bring that up because it's just even more critical. When you're talking about small to mid-sized organizations, getting a hire right, especially at the leadership levels, is absolutely critical. It can make or break your business. So I look at it almost as an insurance policy to reach out to an agency that really knows what they're doing, that can take the time to understand your company, understand the needs of the organization, understand the why we're looking for somebody in this particular role today, to get it right and really mitigate that risk and decrease the chances you're going to have a scenario that you've seen.
I just think, like, some people, want to cheap out, whether it's, buying a certain product or doing some, renovation stuff on their own, to go back to the mortgage industry, housing industry. It's like, no, let's get it right. And, like, in that situation, it wasn't.
I had to hire a plumber yesterday, actually, because our shutoff wasn't working in the basement. It got beyond just a small leak, turning it on and off in the fall and spring. And so I hired somebody. I thought, I could do this myself. There's no way I could have done this myself. I would have burned my house down, right? So it involved, pipes and whatnot. Right. So, yeah.
Before wrapping this one up, I just thought, entrepreneur and, I've got some experience, to a degree I am with my mortgage business. I work for A+.
Yeah.
But I kind of do everything on my own.
Fantastic organization, by the way. You've done tremendous things for us. Thank you.
We'll do a second. We'll talk a little real estate next one.
Okay.
But thank you. All right. Before we wrap up here, Brian, I just thought asking you, there can be a lot of highs and lows, and even, I have some good days and bad days. Maybe I don't get a lead to help somebody or help somebody buy a home. In a stretch, and it's you have that kind of negative self-talk. I guess first, do you get that, and how do you push through? Yeah, in the good years and bad years.
Absolutely. We're human. I don't. You listen to podcasts or you read motivational books, and you think even the person that's doing this motivational talk for you, they have good days and bad days as well. Yeah. And you can ask my wife about that. Either business is too busy or it's not busy enough, and it's where is that perfect spot for you to be?
I wish there was.
I think the reality is whether you're an entrepreneur or not, just in business and in life, this is just something that we deal with, right? Yeah. This is life, and I kind of get back again to having the right business partner, as you referenced earlier. It's absolutely critical. I'm married, you're married. It is a lot like that. It's riding the ups, riding the downs, knowing who you're working with, understanding how to balance each other out when you're having a bad day.
Sure.
Try to lift the other person up and vice versa, and understand that, tough times, as long as you're persistent and you've managed your resources well, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. But we have good days and bad days. Absolutely. Right. At the end of the day, building a business, understand what it is that you'd like this business to be, find the right business partner, manage your resources well, be persistent, and understand that when there's difficult times, as long as you're persistent, things are going to be all right.
Right. I love it. And maybe last one, just with the Doge stuff, people losing government jobs. Are you seeing people reach out to you, or is that just a topic we should go into? Or
I'm happy to get into it. I would say we're not being political here. But you specifically mentioned about Doge and people reaching out. It is actually a service that we've set up as an organization, encouraging people that have been affected by some of the layoffs, in particular in areas of technology, engineering, in human resurces. If you're affected by those, we're trying to help individuals find
I was just curious.
opportunities back into the private sector, and there's certainly pathways there. But there is a lot of uncertainty right now, for sure. And it's hard to know how everybody's experiencing this right now as a small organization. But again, we're going to get through this. But looking forward to getting to the other side as quick as possible.
Yeah. Agreed. So let's wrap it up. Maybe just with a summary, entrepreneurship. The last couple tips or recap.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage anybody that's interested in trying to build his or her own business to pursue it. Put some thought into some of the things I've talked about: business partner selection, how you're going to fund the business, how you're going to maintain finances in the organization to buy yourself time when things get difficult. But I would absolutely encourage people to go and pursue that. I look at 20 years now of running Quovis, and the number of my friends and family members that have been with one large organization or thinking they would be there, and that's just not always the case. They wind up being with 2 or 3 or 4 different employers along the way. You can do this. Now I think about it as I've got 4 children of my own, and one of them is a sophomore now at Madison. One's going to be a freshman at Marquette this fall, and the oldest one has talked at times about, what about this business idea or that? It's a little bit different as a parent. You start thinking about
all the challenges you had,
all the uncertainty you're going to face. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to encourage people to go out and start a business if that's something that you're excited to do. And you've got good people around you that are, make sure you're bouncing these ideas off other people, and just again, be persistent, be patient. success often doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And understand that these things take time, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and to piggyback on it, like what you were saying earlier in the podcast, just like experience. I mean, you got an experience with a small company, startup company. You ran a started company, and then you work for a big corporate company. Man, you got a ton of experience in your 20s.
Sure.
And then you start, that all
Certainly
played
helps.
a role.
Certainly helps.
Yeah.
To have those different
Get
experiences
experience
along the way.
out
Absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, Brian, this has been awesome.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
man. Learning
Thanks for
entrepreneurial journey here.
Thanks for sharing your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing your time. All right.
Thanks, John.
This has been the Snod Pod with Jon Snodgrass, your mortgage resource, talking real estate, mortgages, entrepreneurship, executive search, just, wiseness from Brian Callahan. Thanks for watching.